You've been told a multi-cloud strategy is your best defense, that spreading your assets across AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud makes you a more challenging target. That diversification is the pinnacle of digital resilience. Well, what if you've been told a lie? In the next few minutes, we're going to break down the 3 hidden backdoors this strategy creates. I'll show you how the very thing you believe is protecting you might actually be making the perfect storm for a catastrophic breach, turning your cloud strategy into a ticking time bomb. Thank you for tuning into your SASE Gateway YouTube channel. Subscribe if you want more straightforward content like this about SASE and cybersecurity topics. First, let's talk about the conventional wisdom, because the logic seems pretty sound. Why put all your digital eggs in one basket? Spreading workloads across multiple cloud service providers, a strategy now used by a vast majority of organizations, promises a world of benefits. You get to pick the best services from each provider, whether it's Google's data analytics, AWS's compute power, or Azure's enterprise integrations. You avoid vendor lock-in, which gives you negotiating power and flexibility. And of course, there's the security advantage, or so the theory goes. The idea is that an attacker who gets into your AWS environment won't automatically have the keys to your Azure kingdom. You've built walls between them. You've diversified the risk. In theory, each cloud is its own silo, its own fortress, which should reduce your blast radius and contain any potential damage. This belief is comforting. It suggests that by simply adding more providers, you're inherently adding more layers of security. It's a powerful narrative, and it has driven a massive shift in the industry. But this story completely ignores the complex, fragile, and often invisible connections that have to exist to make this whole strategy work. And it's in these hidden connections that the real danger lies. The truth is, you haven't built a series of disconnected fortresses. You've built a sprawling, interconnected city with no central guard force, and you've left the gates wide open. The first and most dangerous myth is that multi-cloud contains breaches. The reality is that the complexity you've introduced is a breeding ground for the single biggest threat in any cloud environment: identity and access management, or IAM, failures. Misconfigured IAM is a top concern for a reason. Think about it. Your applications don't live in isolation. A service running in AWS needs to talk to a database in Azure. A user needs to access resources across all 3 major clouds. To make this work, you create credentials, service accounts, and API keys that act as bridges between these environments. In your quest for seamless operation, you've built superhighways for attackers to travel across your supposedly separate fortresses. So, and at the core of the problem, we've got this rampant issue of excessive permissions. Security teams, honestly, they're stretched really thin, trying to manage all these different interfaces and policy models for each cloud provider. And the skills gap is a real crisis right now. 76% of organizations report they just don't have enough qualified staff to manage multi-cloud security. Under all that pressure to keep development moving, it's just way too easy to grant overly broad permissions. Like a developer might get admin rights just to get it working, or maybe a service account gets created with God mode privileges because, well, untangling the exact permissions needed is just too time consuming. This is where the illusion of a small blast radius totally shatters. An attacker doesn't actually need to breach AWS, Azure, and Google independently. They only need to find one weak link, maybe a single stolen developer credential from a phishing attack, or just one exposed access key that was accidentally committed to a public code repository. With excessive permissions, that one key isn't just a key to a single room anymore. It's basically a skeleton key that can unlock doors across your entire multi-cloud estate. We see this over and over. Attackers get a minor foothold, exploit overprivileged IAM roles, and then move laterally from a non-critical dev environment in one cloud to mission-critical production data in another. The walls of your fortresses honestly become meaningless when the guards themselves are handing over the keys. The second hidden danger here is what I like to call the compliance black hole. Your organization is probably subject to a dizzying array of regulations. GDPR in Europe, HIPAA for healthcare data, PCI DSS for financial transactions, and so on. When you're operating in a single cloud, proving compliance is already a monumental task. But when you distribute your data across multiple providers, that task becomes, well, exponentially more complicated. In fact, 61% of companies cite compliance as a primary barrier to cloud adoption. So here's the thing, each cloud provider has its own set of tools, its own logging formats, and its own configuration methods. AWS's security setup is different from Azure's, which is different from Google's. This fragmentation creates some pretty severe visibility gaps. You can't get a single unified view of your compliance posture. Are your encryption standards consistently applied to data at rest in every storage bucket across all providers? Are your network firewall rules in Google Cloud as stringent as the ones in AWS? For many organizations, the honest answer is, I don't know. This lack of a unified view is honestly a nightmare for audits. When regulators come knocking, you can't just present a clean report. You have to manually stitch together data from all these disparate systems, trying to prove you've maintained consistent compliance across environments that were never designed to work together seamlessly. It's a time-consuming, error-prone process. And, this inconsistency is a goldmine for attackers. They know that security teams are struggling with this fragmented reality. They hunt for the weakest link, not in your defenses, but in your policies. They look for that one environment where logging wasn't enabled, where data residency rules were misconfigured, or where a security policy from one cloud wasn't replicated to another. This is the compliance black hole, a void created by inconsistent policies and fragmented visibility, where violations and vulnerabilities can fester for months, completely undetected until it's far too late. The third and final danger is the backdoor created by what developers call loose coupling. This concept suggests that services should be independent but able to communicate with each other through interfaces, typically APIs. In a multi-cloud world, APIs are the glue holding everything together. They connect your front-end web server in one cloud to your microservices in another and your data lake in a third. But here's the catch. This glue is quickly becoming the most frequently targeted attack vector. The problem is that, in the rush to innovate and integrate, API security often becomes an afterthought. Teams are focused on functionality, making sure Service A can get the data it needs from Service B. They're not always thinking about how an attacker could abuse that connection. This leads to common and honestly devastating misconfigurations. APIs with weak or missing authentication, APIs that grant excessive data access, and APIs that lack proper monitoring. Consider a real-world scenario. An attacker discovers a poorly secured API connecting your CRM system in one cloud to a marketing analytics tool in another. The API was only intended to pull anonymized user stats, but because of a simple misconfiguration, a failure to enforce the principle of least privilege, the API key actually has read access to the entire customer database. The attacker can now quietly exfiltrate millions of sensitive customer records, and your traditional network security tools might not even flag the activity as suspicious because it's coming from a trusted API connection. This problem is only getting worse with the rise of technologies like generative AI. Organizations are racing to connect large language models to their proprietary data, creating a host of new, complex integrations that must be secured. Each new connection, each new API is another potential backdoor if it isn't managed with extreme diligence. Your interconnected web of services designed for agility becomes a sprawling, hidden attack surface where a single, insecure API can lead to a full-scale breach. So when you put these three dangers together, the accurate picture emerges. The illusion of the blast radius, the compliance black hole, and the API backdoors all feed into each other, creating a vicious cycle of complexity and risk. It's a ticking time bomb, and human error is holding the detonator. In fact, Gartner predicts that by 2025, a staggering 99% of cloud failures will be the customer's fault, with misconfigurations being a primary driver. Your attack surface is no longer just the sum of your individual clouds. It's a complex, ghost-like network of hidden dependencies, inconsistent policies, and overprivileged identities that spans your entire operation. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can defuse this time bomb. The solution isn't to abandon multi-cloud, but to master its complexity. The path forward involves 3 key strategic shifts. First, adopt a unified security management platform. You can't defend what you can't see. The fragmentation of multi-cloud is your greatest enemy. You need to invest in tools like a cloud security posture management, or CSPM, or a cloud-native application protection platform, CNAPP, that provide a single pane of glass across all your environments. This provides centralized visibility, enables consistent policy enforcement, and automates compliance monitoring, thereby closing the black holes. Second, implement a zero-trust architecture. The era of trusted internal networks is over. A zero-trust model operates on a straightforward principle. Never trust, always verify. This means every access request, whether from a user or a service, must be strictly authenticated and authorized, no matter where it comes from. Enforce the principle of least privilege everywhere. Every user and every service account should have the absolute minimum level of access required to do its job, and nothing more. This is what neutralizes the threat of a compromised credential becoming a skeleton key. Third, automate and shift left. Human error is inevitable, but it can be managed. Automate as much of your security process as you can. Use policy as code to define and enforce security configurations right from the start of the development lifecycle, a practice known as shifting left. By embedding security checks into your code templates and CI/CD pipelines, you can catch misconfigurations before they ever make it to production. Here's the bottom line. Multi-cloud complexity, if you don't manage it, is a security liability, not an asset. Spreading your resources isn't the same as securing them. The absolute path to resilience isn't in diversification, but in unification. A unified security strategy, unified visibility, and unified control. If you're ready to move beyond the myths and build a truly defensible multi-cloud strategy, I encourage you to subscribe to more on cloud security. The threats are constantly evolving, but with the right approach, you can turn your ticking time bomb into a hardened fortress.